After deciding to marry my boyfriend, Ethan, and visiting his family's home to greet them on the day, I found myself being rejected by all his relatives who said, "Don't ever contact us again. We don't want to hear your voice." Perhaps because of their upbringing, being doted on for their good looks, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law were harsh and jealous towards anyone who possessed something they did not. Unfortunately, I became the target of their envy. Both my father-in-law and brother-in-law, without any resistance, joined them in rejecting me. Several months ago, I was able to exact a grand revenge on these four. My name is Amy. I am 27 years old. Now I'm living peaceful and happy days surrounded by love with my husband, adorable child, and my parents. The origin of all this started 3 years ago when I was 24. It was triggered when my boyfriend at the time, Ethan, proposed to me. Ethan and I were colleagues at work, and we became close due to our shared hobby of movie watching, and we started dating after many movie outings together on our off days. Ethan had a calm temperament and was friendly to everyone at work, making him well liked by many. He disliked disputes and was the kind of kind-hearted person who could forgive others' mistakes. Since the time I entered the company, I was interested in Ethan, so when he asked me out, I was overjoyed, and I looked forward to going to work every day. Whenever I made a mistake at work and was feeling down, he would listen to me all night long, and I naturally started thinking, I want to be with this person forever. Ethan had dreams of starting his own business in the future, and I wanted to be by his side to support him all the way. When Ethan proposed to me, I was over the moon. Of course, there was no reason to reject him. I accepted his proposal immediately and decided to marry Ethan. On the weekend after Ethan proposed to me, we immediately went to my family's home, introduced Ethan to my parents, and announced our intentions to marry. Ethan was also kind to my parents, and he even had a great time drinking and getting along with my father. My parents seemed to take a liking to Ethan, and they joyfully agreed to our marriage and shared in our happiness. Seeing Ethan engaging happily in conversation with my parents, I sincerely felt fortunate to have met him. The weekend following the report to my parents, we were scheduled to visit Ethan's house. Having decided to go greet them, I realized that I hadn't heard much about Ethan's family from him. But at the time, I didn't think much of it, considering that Ethan was living alone and probably didn't keep in touch with his parents that much. The night before the day we were to visit Ethan's family, Ethan suddenly said during our phone conversation, "About tomorrow. My parents might be a bit odd, but don't worry about it too much." I was slightly concerned about what he meant by odd, but I figured I would find out the next day, and since we had to wake up early the next day, I decided not to worry about it too much and went to sleep. Around 10 a.m. the next day, I met up with Ethan at the station and we headed towards his house together. Since Ethan was living alone, this was my first time visiting his family home. Despite what I might say, I was nervous all morning, and when I was walking with Ethan, I hardly heard what he was saying because my heart was pounding so fast. What stood there was a grand mansion, like a castle. The garden was vast, and I was petrified when I thought, Ethan grew up here? My nerves eased a little when Ethan, with his usual gentle smile, said, "Are you nervous? It's okay, let's go." As soon as the front door opened, my mother-in-law was there to greet me. "Oh my, you've come all this way? You must be tired. Come on in quickly." She greeted me kindly. She was very slender, well made up, and her hair was beautifully arranged. Her expensive, wrinkle-free clothes were flawless. Once inside, my father-in-law, brother-in-law, sister-in-law, and their children were waiting. Everyone in the family other than my mother-in-law greeted me with smiles, which was a relief. I was warmly welcomed, took a seat on the sofa, had dinner while chatting with everyone, and announced our engagement. Ethan's family was very pleased, especially my mother-in-law and sister-in-law were excited, saying, "We're so happy to have such a cute girl join our family." I was moved by the warm welcome from these people. The pleasant conversation continued. Ethan's family were very talkative, and according to the stories that came up, my father-in-law ran a company that sold package tours, and my brother-in-law who lived with them was working there as an executive director, intending to take over the company in the future. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law were housewives, supporting their husbands' lives, and they were living gracefully, attending dance classes and flower arrangement lessons during the day. My sister-in-law also took care of her appearance, and she exuded a confident atmosphere. My father-in-law was very kind, always smiling at me and making me feel at ease by bringing up various topics so that I wouldn't be nervous. I was sincerely glad he seemed like a good person. At that moment, a certain conversation with my father-in-law broke the harmonious atmosphere. "Amy, I heard that you work at the same company as Ethan. Are you a contract employee there?" No, I originally joined the company as a regular employee after graduating from university, just like Ethan. The company where Ethan and I work is a major corporation, known to the public as a top-tier company. It's a popular company among job seekers, and getting hired as a regular employee is challenging. But luckily, I was hired as a new graduate after college. Oh, is that so? Huh. In that case, where did you graduate from? I graduated from Harvard. That's amazing. You must be really talented. I'm so proud that someone as talented as you is marrying into our family. Amy's awesome, isn't she? She is very hardworking. She's competent at work and quick-witted. I'm so happy to be marrying her. My father-in-law and Ethan praised me so much it was embarrassing. In fact, I went to a top-tier university in the US, and I studied hard during my high school years, even at the expense of my sleep. My parents, who didn't have much money, worked hard to get me through college. I was determined to attend a good college, land a decent job, and someday definitely give back to my parents. I'd been striving towards that with all my heart. Caught up in a lively conversation with the two others, I noticed that my mother-in-law and sister-in-law had gone quiet. I thought, oh no, and I desperately sought a change in the conversation. And noticing a beautiful arrangement of fresh flowers on the table before me, I asked, "Mother-in-law, that flower arrangement is lovely. Did you put it together?" To which she responded somewhat gruffly, "What? As if you, a professional working in a top-tier company, have any interest in housewives' time-killing activities." Confused, I wondered why her demeanor had changed when just a moment ago she was speaking with a smile. As if in agreement with my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law chimed in saying, "From your point of view, Amy, with your high education, you probably think all us uneducated housewives can talk about is flowers." I hadn't meant it that way at all. Not knowing what to say, I felt a lump in my throat, nearly bringing me to tears. Ethan quickly interjected, "Hey, both of you, stop that. Amy isn't the type to look down on people." Ethan's words were a comfort, but I couldn't bring myself to apologize or say anything, so I just kept my head down. Glancing around, I noticed my father-in-law, who had been drinking since noon, snoring and passed out on the sofa. My brother-in-law was clearly bored, yawning and scrolling through his phone, making the atmosphere in the room really tense. Then, at Ethan's suggestion, "Maybe it's about time we wrap this up," I was finally released from my uncomfortable atmosphere. On our way back to the station, Ethan apologized. "Sorry about today. My mom and sister have a high pride. They're particularly sensitive about their high school graduate." From what Ethan told me later, my mother-in-law had been working at a flower shop right after high school, where my father-in-law had spotted her and fallen in love at first sight. My mother-in-law was certainly a beautiful woman. She had many customers coming into the flower shop just to see her. Every day, my father-in-law would frequent the flower shop, and after a relentless pursuit, they started dating and eventually got married. Even now, it seems my father-in-law is always wrapped around my mother-in-law's little finger, always doing as she says. My sister-in-law was also a beautiful woman. She and my brother-in-law were high school classmates and had reconnected at reunion in their early 20s. Upon seeing how beautiful she had become, my brother-in-law fell head over heels, and after he persisted wooing, they ended up together. My brother-in-law too seems to do whatever his wife tells him to. Sure, I have a high level of education, but I couldn't understand why they felt insecure. They were both beautiful women who had kind husbands who would always protect them. I ended the day feeling unresolved and a little gloomy. A part of me started to question, is this marriage going to be alright? Leaving me with lingering discomfort. In any case, we received approval for our marriage from both families, so we started to plan our wedding. Even though the unease hadn't entirely disappeared, I felt that we would understand each other better if we talked more. "Don't worry, I'll always be on your side, Amy." I was able to stay positive. After nearly 6 months of lengthy preparation and with the final push at hand, it was finally the day before our wedding when Ethan's cell phone rang. It was from his mother. After having a brief conversation over the phone, Ethan let out a surprised shout. "What? Why? Huh? We can't just change it. Hey, hold on." It seemed like the call had been cut off. When I asked what happened, Ethan shocked me with what he said. "My parents, they said they're not coming to the wedding tomorrow." "What? What do you mean?" I was completely unable to digest the situation and anxiously asked Ethan. According to Ethan, it seemed that the in-laws had forgotten that they had booked a trip for the next day and couldn't attend the wedding. Unbelievable. The parents of my husband are skipping the wedding on the day before the ceremony? We stood there in a daze for a while. Not understanding why this happened, we tried calling not only the mother-in-law, but also the father-in-law and brother-in-law many times to get an explanation, but only the dial tone continued to ring and no one picked up the phone. Confused by the sudden situation, we quickly went to the in-laws' house, but the lights were off and there were no cars, indicating that nobody was home. I said to Ethan, "When I went to greet your family the other day, I wondered if I upset your mother and sister." The atmosphere was quite tense at the end, to which Ethan responded, "As I've said before, both my mother and sister have high pride. Smart women tend to be a bit hard-headed. Even if they hold a grudge for such a thing, I wouldn't know." When I asked, "But why would your father also skip the wedding?" Ethan replied, "My dad and brother-in-law, they're both very submissive to their wives. They probably sided with them to not upset my mother and sister." Ethan said this with a distressed look. I was at a loss for words. In the end, we were unable to contact Ethan's family even on the day of the wedding, so we had no choice but to go ahead with the wedding without Ethan's family present. Why did this happen? Did I do something wrong? And was it really true that they forgot they were going on a hot springs trip? Even if it were true, I couldn't comprehend why Ethan's family would choose a trip over attending their own son's wedding. My parents, who had arrived at the wedding venue, were very surprised when they heard that Ethan's family would not be attending. Ethan said to my parents, "I'm very sorry for the trouble my parents have caused." My parents responded, "It's not your fault, Ethan. Don't worry about it. Enjoy the wedding." But their expressions were a bit complicated. I felt terrible for making my parents have such expressions at the wedding. During the reception, we could hear whispers among Ethan's friends and mine asking, "Why aren't Ethan's parents here?" And the boss from work, who kindly agreed to give a toast, also asked, "What happened to your parents?" leaving us wondering how to answer. He couldn't possibly say, "My parents are at a trip instead of attending their son's wedding." When we were asked about Ethan's parents that day, we brushed it off saying they were feeling unwell. What was supposed to be a joyous day turned out to be one mentally exhausting day. Several days after the wedding ceremony, Ethan and I went to his parents' house to report that the ceremony had ended. "Oh, Amy, it's been a while. How was the wedding? Did you have fun?" "Oh, I'm sorry. I couldn't make it because of my trip that day. I meant to buy you a souvenir, but I got so busy and forgot." She said this with no signs of remorse. "No, it's okay. I'm glad you enjoyed your trip." Inside, I felt sadness, wondering why I had to suffer such treatment, but to avoid worsening our relationship with Ethan's family, I responded with a forced smile. Ethan said, "It's unacceptable to cancel the day before. A wedding where all the relatives are absent? Is that even normal? If you didn't want to attend, we shouldn't have invited you in the first place." Then the sister-in-law said, "I would have attended if Amy wasn't the bride." What? What does that mean? I was so confused that my head started spinning. Then, as if to counterattack, the mother-in-law said, "Don't just blame us. I wanted to see my cute son's once-in-a-lifetime moment, but Amy ruined it. I'm a victim too. I'd like an apology." Ethan spoke up on behalf of me, who was too shocked to respond. "What do you mean Amy caused it? Amy didn't do anything." Then the father-in-law, who had been silent, finally spoke. "Enough is enough. How dare you come in here in the middle of our day off and complain? Is that all you came here for? Get out." He yelled at us with incredible ferocity, and we were forcibly kicked out. And as I was putting on my shoes at the entrance, I felt a prick on the bottom of my foot. Ouch! In a panic, I lifted my foot and saw a caterpillar crawling inside my shoe. Ew! I, with one shoe on, ran outside and let the caterpillar go. The mother-in-law and sister-in-law, who had been watching, said, "Are you okay?" while snickering maliciously. I, who wanted to get out of there as soon as possible, said, "Sorry for the trouble," and was about to leave the house quickly when I was stopped by my mother-in-law. "Amy, please don't get involved with us except for weddings and funerals." Huh? Before I could ask why, she abruptly closed the door, ending the conversation. I really don't understand what I've done. I just wanted to get along with Ethan's family. On the way home, Ethan kept apologizing to me. He said, "You don't have to force yourself to interact with my family anymore. I'm really sorry." The mother-in-law and sister-in-law said they would have attended the wedding if I hadn't been the bride. Feeling as if I was the one who had done something wrong without even knowing why, I started to feel sorry for Ethan. The very next day, I woke up to intense itching all over my body. The itch was so unbearable that I jumped out of bed and rushed to the mirror, only to find my entire body had swollen up fiery red. I was supposed to work that day, but quickly got a sick day and went to the dermatologist. Apparently, the swelling on my entire body was due to the caterpillar stings. The caterpillar from yesterday, huh? The itching was incredibly intense, and for about 2 weeks since that day, I was unable to sleep properly due to the severe itching. Come to think of it, I noticed my brother-in-law touching my shoes at the front door when I went to Ethan's house. The old me would have thought a caterpillar had just accidentally crawled in, but at that time, I felt nothing but distrust towards my in-laws. A month after that, Ethan was hospitalized due to ill health. He had been complaining of frequent stomach pains for a week before being hospitalized, so I, who was worried, forcefully made him take a day off from work and took him to the hospital, where he was told that he probably had a gastric ulcer and needed to be hospitalized for further tests. I was told not to contact them unless it was for a wedding or a funeral, so I hesitated, but I thought that it was not something to keep secret from Ethan's parents, so I plucked up the courage and called my in-laws. Hello? My mother-in-law picked up the phone. While the phone was ringing, I couldn't stop my hand from shaking, and I felt nauseous the moment I heard my mother-in-law's voice. That's how much I had come to dislike my mother-in-law. Hello, it's Amy. I'm sorry I haven't been in touch. What is it this time? Well, Ethan has been hospitalized due to ill health. They think it might be a gastric ulcer, but he's being admitted for tests just in case, so I thought I should let you know. Ah, a gastric ulcer, huh? Isn't it because you're overworking him? Please don't call me for such trivial matters. I'm busy. Trivial matter? Don't you care about Ethan? I don't want to hear your voice. I'll tell you clearly because you seem dull. I don't want to have anything to do with you from now on, so please don't contact me again. I'm worried about Ethan, that's why I'll call him directly. Then my brother-in-law suddenly came on the phone. Look, you're too persistent. Read the room a little. I don't know if Ethan's been hospitalized or what, but it's annoying to have you contact us every time. He hung up the phone unilaterally. The moment I heard the sound of the phone hanging up, I felt like something inside me had snapped. The in-laws who mercilessly threw harsh words at me, the mother-in-law who said don't contact us even though her own son was hospitalized, and the entire family of in-laws who rejected me unilaterally, I couldn't forgive them. You don't want me to contact you again because it's a bother? I don't want to have anything to do with that strange family. I will never contact them again, no matter what happens. After that, there were no significant abnormalities in Ethan's test results, and it turned out to be a mild gastric ulcer, so he took medication for a while and his health improved significantly. Of course, I explained the whole situation to Ethan. Ethan, with a look of resolve on his face, told me, "Let's stop getting involved with my family. The only person that matters to me now is Amy. If they can't accept Amy, then even if we're connected by blood, they're not family to me." A year after that happened, Ethan finally left his job and realized his long-standing dream of starting a software sales business. He had been dreaming of starting his own business since before we got married. Of course, he leveraged his previous job experience to accomplish this. Ethan worked harder than anyone else at his job to achieve this. Although we're still at the starting point, I was happy to see even a bit of Ethan's dream becoming a reality. And our happiness continued. A year after he started his business, a healthy baby boy was born to us. My parents were overjoyed at the birth of their grandchild. Despite the nearly 2-hour journey from my house to theirs, they visited us frequently, making each day extremely blissful. Naturally, we did not report the birth of our child to Ethan's parents. Well, even if we had, they probably wouldn't have cared anyway, so it doesn't really matter. We didn't hear a thing from Ethan's parents after the phone call. Feeling relieved that we didn't have to deal with that peculiar family anymore was somewhat comforting. Then, several months later, something happened. The new coronavirus began to spread globally, and our country also declared a state of emergency and called for people to refrain from going out. Watching the news, all we saw were discussions about coronavirus. As the call for non-essential outings to be refrained grew louder, it was clear that the restaurant and tourism industries were severely affected. My heart ached for them. Suddenly, I wondered how the package tour company run by Ethan's father was doing, but it was none of my concern. No, I might have even cracked a smile imagining the state of his father's business. Despite the circumstances, Ethan's business was doing very well. While there was some instability in our income when we first started the business, recently our income has been higher than when Ethan was an employee and everything was going well. Around this time, Ethan started to receive a lot of calls from his parents' home. However, Ethan seemed to be avoiding getting involved with them, and he didn't pick up the phone even when he noticed the calls. There were also some voicemails left, but because he decided not to be involved with his family anymore, he ignored them without even listening to them. I often told Ethan, "You don't have to worry about me. It's okay to get in touch with them. From my perspective, I despise his family. But for Ethan, they're his family who raised him, and I felt guilty making him cut ties with his parents because of me. However, Ethan told me, as I've said before, Amy is the most important person to me, not my parents. If they can't accept Amy, even if they are my parents, I can't value them. I felt sorry, but also happy for Ethan's unwavering kindness. Ethan was still receiving calls from his father and mother every day, all of which he ignored. Then one day, a letter arrived from Ethan's family home. The letter simply stated, "Our business is on the verge of bankruptcy and we have some financial matters we'd like to discuss. We need to talk as soon as possible." Pretty audacious for someone who had cut ties with us. Their nerve was just as strong as ever, and they demanded urgent contact. Of course we didn't get in touch. Let him suffer. That's what he deserves. Next thing I knew, my cell phone was ringing. I didn't notice the call as I was at work, but a voicemail was kindly left for me. It seemed like Ethan had not been answering his phone, so the caller had reluctantly reached out to me instead. It's quite audacious, especially when I had told them not to contact me. Reluctantly, I decided to listen to the message that was left on my voicemail. All I got was a message saying, "Is this Amy's number? If Ethan continues to ignore me, I'll come knocking. Let him know." That's all it said. 2 days after the voicemail was left, Ethan had the day off because it was Saturday. We were enjoying a leisure family day at home. We had just finished lunch and were discussing what to do for the rest of the day when the doorbell rang. When I checked the monitor, there stood my 4 in-laws. Seeing my shocked face, Ethan came over to check the monitor as well. Ethan let out a heavy sigh and said to me, "You don't have to answer. They'll give up and leave if we don't open the door." However, I said, "It's fine. They've come all this way, so we should let them in. It's kind of pitiful." Ethan thought for a moment, then said, "Okay," and unlocked the door. Pitiful? No way would I ever feel that way about such diabolical in-laws. I purposely didn't tell Ethan about the voicemail. All of this was to lure them into our home. Of course, my shock at seeing them through the monitor was just an act. I knew they would show up sooner or later. There was a reason why I let Ethan's parents into our house. The real retaliation is yet to come. It's time for a full-scale confrontation. The entire in-law family had come to our front door. As soon as the door was opened and the 4 of them marched in without a hint of restraint, spoke in a frustrated tone, "How long does it take to just open the door?" Such a bunch of ill-mannered people, it's unbelievable. As soon as they entered the house, Ethan's mother saw our son happily playing with his toys on the floor and said, "Whose child is this?" I responded, "He's our son." "Ah, I remember now. You said not to contact you anymore, so I didn't report it. But I don't think you're interested in anyway, so whether or not I report it makes no difference." Upon hearing this, Ethan's mother stared at me with a look of contempt and muttered under her breath, "You are so cheeky." I was starting to enjoy the situation and asked Ethan's father, "So what brings you here today? If you wanted to visit, you should have let us know in advance." Ethan's father responded, "Didn't you read the letter?" "Do you mean the one that arrived 2 days ago?" I said, to which Ethan's father angrily said, "If you read it, you should have contacted us. It said we needed to hear from you urgently." Quick to respond, I said, "Oh, you wanted me to contact you? But you said you didn't want to have anything to do with us anymore, so I didn't think it was necessary." Looking at the stern faces of the 4, it was hard for me to suppress my laughter. Ethan, my husband, remained silent as if letting me say everything I wanted. True to form, he knew how to read the room. It's hard to believe he was born to parents who lacked such common sense. Then my father-in-law abruptly changed his attitude and began pleading. "I beg you, I apologize for the past. Due to this COVID situation, everyone's been canceling their travel reservations one after another. We're not getting any new bookings either, and who knows how long this situation will continue. If things go on this long, my business will be ruined, so can't you help me out with some money?" I responded, "I see, that's tough, but no. I'm afraid I have to decline. I don't want to conveniently assist someone who said they wanted nothing to do with me anymore. However, if you're really desperate, if you show me sincerity, I might reconsider." My father-in-law shouted, "What the hell?" and started to intimidate me with a furious face. But I wasn't scared anymore. I decided to handle things my way. "I didn't say you had to. Feel free to leave if you want to." My father-in-law looked vexed, slowly started begging. "I'm sorry, please help me out," he pleaded. Seeing that, I didn't respond. He told the other 3 to also apologize to me, and finally, all 4 of them started begging. When I responded, "No thank you," with a smile, my father-in-law suddenly got angry and banged his hand on the table. He then shouted, "You! When I'm humbling myself, you're getting high and mighty," and grabbed my collar. Surprised by his sudden aggression, I was about to tell him to stop when Ethan said, "Hey, Dad, don't lay a hand on Amy." My father-in-law asked, "You're going to take your wife's side when your parents are begging like this?" Ethan replied, "The most important person to me right now is Amy. I can't care about someone who treats Amy poorly, even if they're my parents. And I don't need any superficial apologies just for money. If you can't apologize to Amy from the bottom of your heart, just leave." At this, my father-in-law, seemingly enraged, punched Ethan square in the face. "Is that how you talk to your parents?" Blood was coming out of Ethan's mouth from the punch. I tried to say something to my father-in-law, but he was still so angry. He started to kick Ethan, who was on the ground. I yelled, "What are you doing to Ethan?" and tried to hold my father-in-law from behind, but he shrugged me off and I was thrown back, hitting my head on the corner of the table. I touched the back of my head where I hit it. My hand came back covered in blood. The other 3 people, excluding my father-in-law, looked shocked and frozen in place. As my father-in-law started ransacking the room shouting, "Where's the money?" I quickly opened the balcony window and yelled to the people passing by, "Help! I'm being murdered!" 5 minutes later, the police arrived. When the police arrived, my father-in-law quickly calmed down and began to blather, "Sorry for the commotion. I just got carried away with the excitement of seeing my grandson. My daughter-in-law seems drunk or something. She's been shouting strange things," he started with a flippant smile. I explained to the officer, "Please take this man away. He hit both my husband and me. He's also been ransacking our house, demanding cash." Suddenly, father-in-law shouted, "I didn't do anything!" And with a curse, he punched a hole in the wall. He was arrested on the spot. The other 3 of them were also taken to the station for questioning. Afterwards, it seems that father-in-law was held in jail for a while. Ethan, my husband, had been punched in the cheek, but fortunately, it was just a light cut and bruise that healed quickly. On the other hand, the wound on the back of my head turned out to be bigger than I thought, and I ended up getting 10 stitches. I feel guilty for causing Ethan to get hurt as a result of luring my in-laws to our house for my revenge, but I'm glad that they have stopped asking for money, seemingly regretting their actions. From what I heard later, as I expected when they first met me, father-in-law praised me and both my mother-in-law and sister-in-law became jealous. The 2 of them apparently instructed father-in-law and my brother-in-law to act coldly towards me. Of course, neither father-in-law nor my brother-in-law could stand up to them and were merely doing as told. The caterpillar that ended up in my shoe was likely the work of my brother-in-law, egged on by my sister-in-law. Jealousy is indeed frightening. It's unbelievable how much it can change someone's life. You never know what might happen. Afterwards, as expected, my in-laws had no way of getting their hands on money. Their business went bankrupt. And their house was seized. Now it seems they live in a cheap apartment. Both my father-in-law and my mother-in-law are nearing 70. It's difficult for them to find work again. My brother-in-law had been working at father-in-law's company, but taking advantage of being the boss's son, he didn't work seriously and seemed to spend all day at the casino. Approaching 50 with no useful skills, it's hard for my brother-in-law to find a job, and it seems he's now making a living with a part-time job at a convenience store. My sister-in-law had been a stay-at-home wife with no significant career, and she seemed to be job hunting at employment agencies and the like. However, due to her selfish personality, she kept complaining about this and that and couldn't hold a part-time job down for long. Now, she seems to be cooped up at home. A little after that incident, my father retired and we decided to live together with my parents. The person who proposed living together was none other than Ethan. It was because I am an only child and he was concerned about my parents' life in their old age. I've returned to work now, and my parents take care of our son during the day, so I feel secure balancing childcare and work. Ethan, my beloved husband, and my kind parents. And of course, my son, who is my treasure. Life with them is the happiest. I resolve never to forget to be grateful for this happiness.